I'm a philosopher by training and practice. I teach at a university in the United States. I was not born in the United States, I was born in Canada, and I grew up in Canada. I liked to read books a lot and play sports and do theater and camping. But when I went to university, I fell in love with philosophy. At that time, I was planning actually to be an engineer and an architect, but after I graduated, I decided philosophy was what I wanted to pursue, so I moved to the United States for graduate school. Enjoyed my philosophy career in graduate school, and then got a job as a professor and have been writing and teaching and lecturing ever since. Philosophy is your set of beliefs about your life and the world, including other people, and it's your most general set of beliefs. You will have particular goals, particular friendships, particular enemies, particular views about the way the world works, the weather, physics, and so forth. But philosophy is at a higher level of abstraction. Do I, for example, think that my life on Earth is my real life, and so that means I'm going to live for maybe 80 years or 90 years, and the important thing is to enjoy and get as much out of this life as possible. And that's one general commitment. Or do I think that really this life is not very important, it's only 80 years, and my real life begins after I die physically, and that I have an immortal life, and that is what I should be thinking about and focusing on? Do I think that I choose my goals, and whether I succeed in life or failure is up to me, that I am mostly the one in charge? Or do I think that really I am weak, I am insignificant, and that what happens to me is a result of forces beyond my control? The gods make decisions, or fate, or there are powerful social forces and I can't do very much about them. Do I think that positive goals in life, beauty and nobility and happiness, are the most important things to pursue? And that, of course, there are ugly things and there are hypocrisies in the world, but those are less important? Or do I think that really love is an illusion and friendship is not real, and that really I should have a darker and more cynical understanding of the way social relationships are going? So it's your most general attitude and beliefs about the way the world works, and including what you can expect for yourself. And really, our life is based on putting into practice our philosophical commitments. Well, good is, again, philosophically, it would be the most general values that are positive with respect to human life. So one way of thinking about the good is in a more biological sense, because humans are complicated, so often it's easier to start with other animals. So you say, suppose you're talking about a bird. What is good for a bird? And you say, well, a bird, if it is going to survive, it has certain nutritional needs. It needs proteins and various other things. So anything that is in the bird's environment that is a source of protein for it would be good for the bird. But we also know that the bird needs to take actions in order to hunt the protein source that it needs. So it has eyes, and so you would say the bird having eyes that work and that work well, that is good for the bird. The bird has feathers and wings. The bird has to fly in order to get to its prey. So it's good for the bird to be able to fly, to keep its feathers clean and in good condition, so that it can do the kinds of actions that will enable it to get the food that it needs, and so on. So in that basic sense, we would say the good are those things in the world that enable you to stay alive, and also the good is your core capacities that you can exercise that will enable you to act in the world to get the good things out there in the world. So in the case of human beings, we would tell then a more complicated story. We would say, like other animals, we have nutritional needs. So some things in the world are a source of nutrition for us. Those are all good for us. And we contrast things that have no nutritional value for us, they are neutral. On things that are poisons or toxic for us, those are bad for us. And then we would, just if we stick with the example of food, to keep it simple, we would say things that enable us to act in the world. Hunting, farming, the performance of agriculture, doing science to discover new food sources, doing engineering to develop machines that can enable us more productively to get food in the environment. All of those capacities are also good for human beings. And then to get even more broad, because human beings are more complicated, we typically start to do these in social situations with divisions of labor, and so economics becomes important. And so we have to identify good economic arrangements that enable us, again, just to keep the example simple with respect to food, to be productive with respect to food, political arrangements, the same sort of thing. Well, everybody needs philosophy. As a human being, we all need to make decisions about what our lives are going to be. Am I going to get a job, or am I going to be a thief? Am I going to pursue love and genuine friendship, or am I going to be lazy and let my fears get the better of me and give up on that? Am I going to learn about the world and want to explore the most beautiful things, the great art that has been created, to travel and explore, to think about the galaxies, or am I going to just live in a very tiny intellectual framework? So as a human being, we have a brain, and our brain, like any other organ, it needs to be exercised, and to the extent that we use it and use it well, we become stronger and our lives become more successful. And I think that's borne out by people who don't try to think hard and to come up with the best answers that life can offer, and to learn from the smartest people who have gone before them. They go through their lives living in a small box. They don't expand. They often get a sense that other people are doing well in their lives and having adventures, and they have betrayed or given up in some sense on that. So they feel unfulfilled. They're often the kind of people who have a crisis when they are in their middle years and they realize that they have wasted 20 or 30 or 40 years of life when they could have been doing so much more. So as human beings, we don't operate automatically. We don't just have instincts that tell us what we need to do. Human beings need to think and discover and explore and experiment, and the more you do that, the more philosophical you become. So everybody needs to be philosophical. Does everyone have an implicit philosophy? Well, that's an interesting question. To think and to formulate abstract ideas and to come up with theories, that takes effort. It's a lot of work. And one of the things, of course, we know is that some people are energetic and they do think a lot and actively, and other people are more lazy. But what I would say is that everyone does have a philosophy, even the laziest people among us. But the way it will typically work is the lazier you are, the more you will absorb ideas from other people who are influential upon you. So you will hear ideas repeated by your parents or by your teachers, or if you go to, you're religious, if you go to religious services, or you listen to music, or you go to movies, all of those will have big ideas about life. And if you're a passive person, you will just absorb the ones that seem to be the most strongly presented to you, or the ones that you hear the most frequently. And they will operate more implicitly and automatically in your psyche. So to that extent, everybody has a philosophy. But that's a more dangerous way to live, an unsatisfying way to live. People will be more explicit in their philosophy and use their ideas more accurately and more powerfully to the extent that they think about them. They make some effort to sort out the ones they think are better from the ones that they think are worse, to be experimental and try out different ideas. Explicit philosophy is the best for humans. Both. Reason and emotion are intimately related psychological functions, and they're both absolutely important to a full human life. Some philosophical traditions, I think, are corrupt, and what they have done is separated reason and emotion. But the way the human psychology actually works is that reason comes first. We have an emotional capacity. We have a capacity for processing information abstractly. But we make decisions about what's important and what is true. And on the basis of that, we program our own emotional capacity. So, for example, if I come to believe, just to take an example, that say the death penalty or capital punishment is good and moral, that there are very bad human beings out there who have done terrible things, and the justice system properly should execute those people. So if I come to believe that, then what's going to happen when a very bad criminal is caught and found guilty and executed is good. I will feel a positive emotion. That was the right thing to do. But on the other hand, suppose I believe, by contrast, that every human life is sacred and that no human being should ever be killed, that the justice system is flawed and cannot be trusted, and that's not our place to make these sorts of decisions in order to keep our own sense of morality pure. Suppose I believe all of those things, then what will happen is when I hear that the justice system has caught someone, even if I think that's a bad person, and has executed that person, then I will feel anger and revulsion. Now, the point then is going to be that in both cases, the strong emotions that you feel result from the previous intellectual beliefs that you have come to acquire. And so, but both are also important. It is important to think and to come to important beliefs about matters of justice and other things. And the natural thing for human beings is to have strong emotions on the basis of that. And I think it's important, partly it's that, having strong emotions is a way of enjoying life. It's also a way of having your mind programmed in a way so if there are dangers out there or negative things out there that you are picking up on, your emotions will be a clue that there's something dangerous or worrisome to worry about. So emotions are playing an important functional role in your life, and so they should be attended to. But the point is, your reason and your emotions work together. Well, the concept of faith is a tricky concept because people mean different things by it. Sometimes people just mean their belief system or their collection of important beliefs about the world. But more importantly and philosophically, faith means a certain way of acquiring your beliefs, and it's contrasted to reason. So I would say first, if by faith we mean believing something just because you want it to be true, or believing something without good evidence, or believing something because you are expected to believe it because authority figures tell you to believe so, then I would say yes, that does make you weak. Because as a human being, the most powerful tool you have is your own mind, your own judgment. You have a big brain, and if you learn to use it well, to gather the evidence, to do experiments, to categorize the world, to be open to new ideas, to be willing to say, I made a mistake about something and to change my mind, that is the most important thing for human beings. That's where most of their strength comes from. That's where science and liberal politics and technology and good education have all come from, people willing to think for themselves and to use their minds. So in that sense, faith, if it means believing something that you want to be true even if you don't have good evidence, or believing something because you're supposed to according to the authority figures, well, that's to turn off your mind. That's to shut down your reason, and that can only make you weak. Well, nihilism, from the Latin word for nothingism, it's a profoundly negative attitude toward all of life, philosophically. So one might come to believe that their life is not worth living. There are no genuine values to pursue. Love is an illusion. Everyone is really pretending to be nice to each other sometimes, but really they are planning to betray you or be hypocritical. Or you might believe that since everything that you do is going to be forgotten after you die, nothing is worth doing. Or you might believe that there are no such thing as genuine knowledge, that everything is just subjective belief or illusions. So nihilism, if pursued consistently, is to say, with respect to everything, no. There's no knowledge, there's nothing worth pursuing, there are no genuine values, and so what is the point? So it's ultimately demoralizing. Now, I'm the opposite of a nihilist. I'm an optimist and a progressivist. I do believe there are genuine values in life, that we can identify what those are, and that we can pursue them successfully. Now, there are no guarantees. There's going to be a lot of failure in life. I think failure is an important part of life, and we shouldn't expect that everything will last forever. We do have, it seems, biological limitations, but within that framework, life is a beautiful set of opportunities to be pursued and enjoyed, and one should go for it. Yes, absolutely. There's a strong relationship between philosophy and politics. My view is actually that most of politics is a practical application of philosophy. Now, it's an enormously complicated set of areas, but suppose you say, for example, with respect to knowledge, do we really know things, and who knows? Well, one connection is to democracies. You might believe, as a philosophical belief, that everybody has their own brain and their own mind, and so the capacities for thinking about important matters, including political matters, are something that everybody should be engaged in. And if you believe that, then that is going to be support politically for a kind of democracy. But on the other hand, suppose you believe that most people are stupid, most people are ignorant, that only a few special people have intelligence to be able to think about important matters, then politically your application of that is going to be a kind of aristocracy. So what you believe about knowledge and the power of human cognition, which is a philosophical issue, has a direct connection to politics. If you also think about human social relationships, suppose you believe that every individual should be pursuing happiness and should have the freedom to pursue happiness in life, then that is going to have political value or implications, because then you're going to say, well, we should set up politics so that ethically people are free to pursue their conception of the happy life and so forth. But by contrast, suppose you have a different view about what's important ethically. Suppose you think that life is about conflict, it's about strong people versus weak people, and that human beings are predators and some human beings are more naturally like prey. Then you don't believe that everybody should be pursuing happiness and that freedom is very important. Instead, you will then say, well, politics should be a matter of the strong grabbing as much power as they can and using the political process to advance their own interests at the expense of the weaker people. But then by contrast, suppose you think that no, ethically, life is not about happiness and the freedom to pursue your dreams, and you don't think that human beings are predator and prey. Suppose instead you believe that human beings should be servants of other people, servants of society, that they should not be concerned about their own happiness, that they should be willing to sacrifice for the good of other people. If that's what you believe ethically is the important values in life, then when you turn to politics, then what you will say is something like, Well, the government then, which has a lot of power, it should use its power to make sure that everybody is serving society, and whether the government is making people happy or respecting their freedoms, that's not going to be very important to you, because you will say, no, people should be doing their duty and sacrificing for the good of society. So in many cases, your political views are an application of your philosophy. Virtue is your character traits, and they are the positive character traits. So, for example, if you suppose you say that you think friendship is an important value, that you're a human being, and that one of the things that makes life very rich and enjoyable is having friends whom you can share all of the important things in your life with. So that's already a philosophical claim, but it's about a value. It's to say friendship is a very important value in your life. But then the follow-up question is going to be, what kind of person do I need to be to really experience friendship and to enjoy good friendship? And so that then is to say, if I am going to be the kind of person who can enjoy friends, and if I'm going to be the kind of person who other people want to be friends with, that I need to be a certain kind of person. So identifying the traits that would make you successful as a friend, those are going to be the virtues. So for example, we will say honesty is important in friendships. Right? Nobody will be friends with someone who is a liar, who is constantly exaggerating and denying things that are obvious truths, because friendship requires trust if we're going to share important things. And so someone who is dishonest, well, you don't want to be friends with someone who is dishonest, but also other people don't want to be friends with you if you are dishonest. So then we say honesty is a virtue, because honesty is a character trait of being forthcoming about important information, about always being committed to stating the truth, being aware of facts. And to the extent that that really is a part of your character, you are an honest person, other people will like that about you, they will be willing to share important information with you, and then you will be able to have a friendship. We would also, so honesty is an important virtue. We would say a sense of justice is important, say, in friendship. So with friends, you're going to be playing games, and if you are living with your friends, you're going to have some sense that everybody is doing what they're supposed to make the household work and so on. And so if you're committed to treating other people fairly, and you want to be treated fairly, and you're going to do your fair share, if people know about you that you really are a fair and a just person, then they will be willing to share important living decisions and so forth with you. So having a character trait of being committed to justice is also then important. So identifying all of those important character traits that serve you in all areas of life. Here we're just talking about friendship, but also in your work, in your love, in your approach to pursuing your life in general. Being a certain kind of person who is able successfully to do those things, those virtues are positive character traits. Dignity is a self-reflective value. It's to identify that you are an important person and that you like and respect who you are as a person. And so that has implications for what you will expect for yourself, how you will speak, what your posture will be. Do you pay attention to good nutrition and good exercise? And it will also have implications for how you expect other people to treat you in a way that you think is respecting of who you are. So it will set the conditions for your social interactions. And I think dignity comes from believing genuinely that you are valuable, respecting who you are and liking who you are. And to the extent that you have self-respect you will act a certain way, and you will expect other people to treat you a certain way. So what is integrity and its relationship to dignity? I think integrity is a precondition of dignity. So I'll start with integrity. Integrity, as the word suggests, means to integrate. And the most important kinds of integrations are between what you think and what you do. So the opposite here would be someone who is a hypocrite. And we know hypocrites are intensely irritating to all of us because they are people who will say one thing, but they will do another thing. That is to say, they are disintegrated. So an integrated person is someone who believes certain things and then acts actually on the basis of what they think is true and what they think is good. And that's a very important virtue, a very important character trait, because that's what life is about. We have to figure out what we think is true, what we think is important, and then we have to act on the basis of that. So life requires integrity. So if you believe that something is important but you don't do it, well, then you're just going to die. Or if you think that something is true but you act in the opposite way, well, if what you believe is true but you act in the opposite way, then you are going to damage yourself. So integrity is an important virtue for people to act in the basis of. And so we know, for example, that hypocrites, nobody likes a hypocrite. We are constantly attacking politicians, right, and other people. You know, last week you said this, and now this week you're saying that. Last year you said this, and now you're doing that. It hates us. We hate those politicians. We do that in general in life. We can't be friends. We can't be intimate with people who are hypocrites. So integrity is absolutely important. Now, its connection to dignity, I think, is more intimate with yourself, because we all have a reputation with respect to other people, and other people have reputations with respect to ourselves, but we also have a reputation for ourselves. So if I know about myself that I am a hypocrite, that I believe that something is true, but I don't act on the basis of it because I'm too afraid or because I'm too lazy, then I get a reputation for myself of being a lazy person or being a coward. And it's impossible for you to have dignity, to like yourself and to respect yourself, if you believe that you are a coward and if you believe you are a hypocrite, right, or lazy in any way. The only way you can get dignity is by having integrity, believing something is true and going for it. Maybe you will succeed, maybe you will fail, but you know that you really tried, and you will have then one component of dignity among yourself. So if you come to believe you're a coward, that you are lazy, that you are a hypocrite, all of those failures, your reputation with yourself will be damaged and you won't have dignity. So I think dignity comes from integrity. Liberty is a social status of being able to act as one judges by one's own mind. So in a social context, people, of course, can be enormously valuable to you as trading partners in business, as friends, and so forth. But people also can be a threat to you. And we know there are lots of people who want to take your stuff, steal from you, who want to make slaves of you, who sometimes want to kidnap you or assault you. And so all of those things are threats to your liberty. So by liberty, we mean the situation or the status of not being subject to compulsion by other individuals or by the government. Well, individualism is a hotly contested philosophical concept, and I think, yes, absolutely, individualism is important. Now, the contrast of individualism is to a certain kind of socialism or a certain kind of collectivism, and here the important part of this is the ism part, the ISM, where you say, anytime you talk about an ism, you are talking about a general set of principles that have been identified explicitly. Now, individuals are important, social groups are important, collective groupings can be important and good as well. But when you're talking about an ism, you are identifying what is the most important reality. And here, yes, I am an individualist. Now, the reason for this is that if we think about the most important values in life, all of them are things that are only processed by individuals. So at a very basic level, to stay alive, I need to chew my food. Right? And I am the only one who can chew food. I need to swallow the food. It needs to go into my stomach. It needs to be metabolized by my individual organ. I need to use my lungs, and I need to breathe for myself. I need to use my eyes and view everything. So at a basic biological level, human life is individual. Now, human beings are more complicated. We're also very rich psychologically beings. So we have a brain and a mind. But again, the operation of the brain is an individual. I need to think for myself, make my own decisions, process my own information. Just like I can't, breathe for you and you can't breathe for me, I can't think for you and you can't think for me. Right? These are all individual processes that we need to do. If you think about the values, the important things in life, so I'm going to have a political belief. Well, if my political beliefs are going to be genuine, I need to think for myself and make my own decision what those beliefs are going to be. If all I do is, well, here are 10 people and I just believe whatever most of them believe, well, that's not going to be a useful set of political beliefs for me. Or my philosophical beliefs, or my religious beliefs, or my musical taste, right? Or the way that I dress. I need to make my own decisions about what my musical tastes are going to be, to explore different kinds of music and make up my own mind. If I, again, in that situation, just say, well, whatever most other people like musically, I'm just going to like that. Or whatever kinds of food other people like, I'm just going to like that kind of food. Or whoever other people are choosing for me to marry, I'm just going to marry that other person. The important values in life, love, the arts, music, your political beliefs, your religious beliefs, and so on, all of those are things that are best done you deciding for yourself. Well, capitalism is used variously. Sometimes it is meant to refer to an economic system that is more advanced, where we talk about capital in its more abstract form, the development of tools and technology and the rule of law and monetary savings that can be invested as capital. And you have a system where the economics are driven largely by this very sophisticated economic set of institutions. And the contrast then is to more primitive economic systems where, say, one is a hunter, or one is merely gathering from an environment, or one is engaged in simple farming and trading at a market. Now, in the modern world, though, mostly capitalism is contrasted to socialism, and the idea of capitalism in the modern world is that every individual has economic freedom. So I have freedom to make my own choices about what I'm going to produce, to choose my own jobs. I'm not assigned by a job by the government. It's up to me to get a job for myself or to become an entrepreneur and make my own job. I can, with my earnings, buy whatever I want in the market. I'm expected to be self-responsible and negotiate and so on. So capitalism then is individualistic, emphasizing a lot of freedom and a free market economy that respects personal property rights. The contrast then is to socialism, and socialism in varying degrees means that individuals don't make decisions. Rather, we have a more centralized decision-making body that makes decisions about economic matters for the whole of society. I think, yes, absolutely, capitalism is more moral, and that comes out of the individualism. Capitalism says that in economics, you are free to decide for yourself what your career is going to be. Socialism, by contrast, or feudalism, to take an ancient system, both of those alternative systems say that you as an individual don't get to choose what your career is going to be. In socialist systems, for example, the government's going to say, we think that we need more farmers or we need more engineers, and we will assign you to a job. You don't get to make your own choice. And it might be, oh, you think you want to be an artist? Well, we don't need more artists, so you don't get to choose to be an artist. Under capitalism, if you want to be an engineer, or you want to be a farmer, or you want to be an artist, that is your choice. So capitalism respects the individual's choice. And I think that is the most fundamentally moral thing any social system can do. Also, of course, under socialism, we know that whatever you produce, you do not get to keep control over that. It's supposed to go to all of society, and then it's used by other people, including other people who have not been productive. And you don't get a choice. It's one thing for you to say, I have been productive and I choose to share my wealth with other people voluntarily. That's fine. But socialism does not respect your individual choice. It says as a matter of duty, everything that you have produced belongs to other people, and we will give to you what you think you are allowed to have. Now, I mentioned feudalism, so let me say feudalism does the exact same thing. We know that feudalism says every individual is born into a class or into a caste, and so again, you don't get to make choices about what you are going to do. You are required by law and by custom to perform economic functions within predetermined social categories. So capitalism then is one application of individualism, and it's the most moral system. Well, ambition is setting goals, high goals and important goals, and typically challenging goals, and then going for it, actually doing something about it. And I would say, yes, absolutely, ambition is extremely important. So, because life is about setting goals for yourself, and if you want to have the most fully self-realized kind of life, then you have to spend a lot of time figuring out what the important things are. And then the important things typically require great effort over a long period of time. And it's your ambition, that is to say your commitment to following through, that's going to be the only thing that enables you to achieve good goals. So if you think, for example, there are lots of people. Let's start with a simpler example. So as we are recording this, we're toward the end of a calendar year, and a new calendar year is important. And suppose I say, I am not in as good physical fitness as I should be. Maybe I want to lose a little weight. Maybe I want to get some more muscle tone or some endurance. And so you're setting an important physical fitness goal for your life. Well, what is the thing that is going to enable you actually to achieve your fitness goals, whatever they are? It is your ambition. And so then the people we know, unfortunately, there's lots of people who will fail, right? They might say, I will join the gym. And so they do, they join the gym, they pay the money, and they start going to the gym, and then 3 days later, they stop going to the gym. And so they don't achieve their goal. Well, what's the problem there? The problem there is a lack of ambition. And then we say properly to that person, well, you need to have more ambition. And it's the ambitious people who are going to keep in mind their long-term goals, keep them real in their mind, and when they think about those long-term goals and they're tempted to be lazy and so forth, it's their ambition that will say, no, I'm not going to give into my laziness, I'm going to go and work out or whatever it is and achieve so forth. And that's because life for human beings, we live for a relatively long time, and the kinds of goals are careers. It takes many years to develop a career. To raise children, well, minimally that's an 18 or a 20-year commitment. If you commit to a relationship romantically, it's a long-term relationship. Maybe you get married to someone, and there your hope is that this is going to last until we die. All of those long-term goals require a great deal of ambition ambition if they are going to be successful. And we know one of the reasons why people don't is because they don't have very much ambition. They sit on the couch their whole lives and they don't get up and do anything. Art is obviously very complicated, but absolutely important to the human condition. Let me describe it this way. I'd say art occupies a place between journalism or history and philosophy. That it is an integration of journalism and history and philosophy. And what I mean by that is this. So if you are a journalist, what you do is you describe particular events and activities that are going on in the present. If you are a historian, you describe particular events that have occurred in the past. And the important thing there is you are capturing the way reality is in particularity. Philosophy, by contrast, operates at a level of abstraction. You are talking about high levels of generality or high levels of abstraction about the human condition in general. What is human nature? What is the meaning of life? So those are abstract, whereas journalists and historians are talking about not human nature in general, but particular human beings and their actions. My view is that art integrates those two. What you find, say, in a story, think of a novel, a work of literature, is the story will be about particular individuals, say Romeo and Juliet, to choose a story that I think all of us will know. So you're reading a story and it's about Romeo, and he's a particular young man of a certain age, of a certain family, living in a certain place, and so it's all very particular, and he falls in love with Juliet, who's a young woman of a particular appearance and of a particular family, again living in a particular place. So on one level it can be seen as a historical story about particular individuals. But we're not just interested in Romeo and Juliet as two people, particular individuals, because what Shakespeare in this particular story is doing is also telling us something more general about the nature of love, the nature of young love, the nature of family politics and feuds and love, death, and tragedy. And when we start to talk about all of those values, we're going up a high level of abstraction. Now, we can, of course, as philosophers, and maybe as liberal philosophers like myself, we might say something about love is important, it's an important human value, and it's important that human beings as individuals be able to choose whom they're going to love and whom they're going to marry. And politically, we should not have fathers deciding for children who should be allowed to marry or not, but rather it should be individual choice. So I can say all of those things about the nature of love at a high level of philosophical abstraction. But what's going on in the work of art that is Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet is those philosophical themes are being dramatized through the particular individuals. So there might have been historically a real Romeo and a real Juliet, and they had a tragic love affair and so forth, and they ended up committing suicide. And so that might have been the journalistic inspiration of Shakespeare, and so he takes those particular characters, but then he integrates those with a more general philosophical message. So I think the artworks that affect us most profoundly as individuals and the artworks that stand the test of time, they speak across generations, are the ones that take important philosophical values. And the best artists are also very philosophical, but they capture those philosophical themes in particular embodiments, particular characters, in particular events, in particular places. Postmodernism, as the name suggests, is a reaction against or a view that modernism has reached its end course or is a failure. So to understand postmodernism, you have to ask first, well, what is modernism? And then your view has to be that somehow modernism has failed in some important way, and we are now into something else that is postmodernism. So modernism, the way historians and philosophers use the concept, different sub-disciplines use modernism differently, but philosophically and historically, modernism basically means the last 400 or 500 years of history, particularly Western history. So the idea is that the modern world, characterized by the rise of science, by the rise of technology and the Industrial Revolution, the rise of capitalism and free markets, the rise of democratic and republican politics, the elimination of slavery, the expansion of women's liberties and equality, attitudes of separating church and state, and widespread religious toleration, the importance of respecting individuality in all walks of life. That as the dominant set of trends of the modern world, if you come to believe that that leads to very bad results, then you will be postmodern of a certain sort. Or if you say, that set of views, the modern world, I disagree with it, and I think there's a different way of thinking about important human and social values that we need to go to, then you will be postmodern. But short answer that I would give is to say that postmodernism philosophically is the most negative answer to all of the important questions. Postmoderns will be skeptics about knowledge. They will be skeptical about there being objective values. They will be cynical about the possibility for positive human relations, and they will be negative about what will happen if we have free markets and capitalism, and prefer to replace that with some sort of post-capitalist or anti-capitalist political system. Well, I think it is important that if we think of art history, particularly in the 20th century, that there was a major rupture in the approach to art, say the 1890s and the early 1900s, compared with the art before. Now, art has always been concerned with a wide range of human values. Believing that the world can be beautiful, believing that the world can be ugly, believing that the world is ultimately harmonious, believing that the world is ultimately fractured, believing that the world ultimately makes sense, believing that the world ultimately is intelligible. So any artist and any era in art history, there's always a lot of different attitudes toward the way the world works. But all of that said, there is a great deal of truth to the view that around the turn of the 20th century, around 1900, the artistic community very generally started to turn in a much more pessimistic and negative way toward the world. And so deliberately seeing the world not as a beautiful place, not seeing the world as a harmonious place, not seeing a world as ultimately intelligible, rejecting those more optimistic understandings of the way the world worked. Those beliefs came to be internalized by many artists, and so they started to express in their artistic world, or their artistic worlds, what is the world if you think that, yes, okay, maybe sometimes things are pretty, but the more important truth about the world is that it's ugly, that it's about conflict, that it's about destruction, that it's about death, that it's about all sorts of negative things, and those come to be the dominant themes in the artistic world by the time we turn into the 20th century. Now, the reasons for that, I think, are varied, but most importantly, philosophical. I think one of the reasons has to do with the important intellectuals of the late 1900s, or the late 1800s and early 1900s, are people like Nietzsche and Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud and Charles Darwin and others. Now, how properly to interpret all of these guys are lots of interesting issues as well. But if you take, for example, Karl Marx as perhaps the most prominent economic and political thinker of the early 20th century, if you think that what Marx is teaching is that everything is exploitation, and that it's the strong versus the weak and the rich versus the poor, and everybody is exploited and alienated, and that's really the way the world works. Well, that's a very pessimistic social and political. And if you're an artist and you think it's important in your art to express the truth, well, then you're going to try to express ugliness and exploitation, alienation in your artwork. But the important point here is that Marx is very pessimistic because he's rejecting the contrasting liberal view that's very optimistic. He says, look, human beings should be free, and we should respect human rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And look at us, we abolished slavery, and we're freeing women, and the world is getting better, and we're getting richer. And so it's a very optimistic view of human social relationships. And then if you think that's the most important set of political views and you're an artist, well, then you're going to want to emphasize the positive in the world more than the ugly. Now, I would mention one other point. Nietzsche, for example, is probably the most important philosopher for how people in the 20th century think. Influential on huge numbers of people all over the political spectrum, the religious spectrum, and philosophical spectrum. But one thing that many people will take from Nietzsche is his famous phrase that God is dead. Now, what's your reaction to God is dead? And we can imagine people having profoundly pessimistic reactions to that and exploring that in their art. If you, for example, grew up thinking that God is real and that God is a kind of fatherly figure who teaches us to be moral, and sometimes God is a little bit stern with us, but ultimately God is looking out for us, and in the afterworld there's going to be justice and everyone will hopefully get a chance to go to heaven. But suppose you don't believe that and you think, oh no, God is dead, and then you're pessimistic as a result of that. That means there's no wise father looking out for us, everybody is going to die, and the bad guys are going to get away with things, and I'm just depressed. Well, you can imagine then if you're an artist and you then are struck by Nietzsche's God is dead phrase, then the art that is going to come out is going to be more profoundly negative. But of course, we can imagine people saying, God is dead, finally, we are free, we are liberated. And what God meant for them is, God is this very angry man up in the sky who's always watching you, and he doesn't want you to have any fun. You're not supposed to have sex and enjoy good food and so forth, but you're sneaking around wanting to enjoy those things, and so you feel guilty. And now Nietzsche teaches you that God is dead, and you say, finally free, I am liberated, I can go off optimistically and live a good, happy life. So what your philosophy is, I think, is going to be very influential on your art, because what you're trying to do as an artist is say, what are the most important things that I want to communicate and express, and who am I, and what do I really feel in my artwork? So artists implicitly, but the best artists I think are more explicitly, they're very philosophical in their approach to art. And so what you find then is different eras in art history tend to be reflective of changes in the philosophical content and mood of the era. Well, that is a very hard question, and I'm going to cheat and not give you one. I would say my favorite living painter is an artist named Michael Newberry. He's a contemporary painter based out of California, and I've been following him over his career, and he's developed, but he has a very exuberant love of life, lots of romance and adventure. He loves looking at the world, and so he does a lot of landscapes, some broad landscapes, some intimate. He loves the human body, both male and female, and so what I get from viewing his work is a sense that here is someone who loves the world and who loves human beings and is very skilled at choosing things that I like to look at and spend sometimes a minute, sometimes 2 minutes, however long I'm looking at a given painter. Now here comes the cheating, because I'm then going to say in the whole history of art, I would have to say, I'm just going to give you 4 more names. I would say for sculpture, Michelangelo, because he creates these larger-than-life, beautiful human beings, and you have a sense of power and, again, dignity and grace. And there is no one, in my experience, who is better than Michelangelo at psychologically capturing what it is to be a human being, a magnificent human being in a particular situation. I would also mention Rembrandt for portraiture. So Rembrandt is, of course, great in many respects, but I respond most to its portraits of the human face, his ability to capture the play of light and shadow, but then to capture the inner psychology of a person, what's going on in their mind. And in many cases, you can almost see the story of the person's life just captured in one portrait. He is brilliant at psychological portraiture. Vermeer I would mention for interiors and his ability to capture different textures and the way that light surrounds. He just loves light and the way light interacts and absorbs and is reflected with all kinds of different surfaces. So if you like looking at things, Vermeer is brilliant at letting you enjoy colors and textures and the way light moves around on objects. For landscapes, Monet, again, a brilliant eye, a brilliant colorist, in part made possible by the Industrial Revolution and all of the new paints and so forth, but no one in my experience loves nature and vegetation more, the way color and light interacts than Monet. And again, just this experience of wanting to stop for a minute or two and just notice how lovely and beautiful the world is, Monet. I think the best and only way is by a lot of experimenting and a lot of practice. So you don't want to be a copycat, an imitator of other people. We all want to dress for ourselves. I think it's very natural with young people. Of course, their mothers typically are the ones who start dressing them, and their mothers choose what their clothing is going to be. But at a certain point, you want to choose your own clothing, and just you use that as an example. The way it works is, well, you dress yourself a lot every day. Sometimes you change clothes and you try a number of things, and you look in the mirror and you get feedback from other people whose opinions that you respect, and so you develop your own style. But it takes hundreds and hundreds of days of dressing yourself and a whole lot of experimenting until you find something that is unique, that you enjoy, and that it feels genuine with you, and then other people start to then recognize that it's genuine to you, that you're not just copying other people. The same thing with music. How do you find your own taste in music? Or if you're going to be a musician yourself and to start composing lyrics and music and so forth. Well, again, there's a lot of practicing and a lot of failure, a lot of listening to other music and trying things. And you like that, you don't like that. You learn from other people, but you add a variation. And then at a certain point, you build up your skills, you build up a huge repertoire of musical knowledge, and on the basis of that, then you start to have your own unique, your own genuine voice. And then as you mature, you have your own musical voice. The same thing I think is true of writers. You read a lot of stories, different kinds of stories, but then you start writing your own stories when you're a child, and a certain amount of it is imitative and a certain amount of it is variations. But again, you develop your own, I like these words more than those words, I like these combinations. You start to become more creative and have your own ideas for plots and characters. Then you develop a distinctive voice. So I would say the answer to the question would be a generalization on all of those examples. I would say love the world despite its flaws. So the world is a potentially beautiful place. So much to explore, so much to learn, so many adventures to have, including social adventures, that genuine values are possible to all of us. And the challenge is that often, though, the world is disappointing to us, particularly other people. And of course, it's easy to realize all of the people who have not lived up to your hopeful expectations for them, and to recognize that there's a lot of lying and a lot of hypocrisy and a lot of evil and viciousness out there in the world. And the danger then is to let the negative things that are out there in the world dominate your thinking. And then you become demoralized, you become pessimistic, you become cynical, and that takes away from your enjoyment of life and your energy to pursue the good things in life. So we all know that there is lots to learn. We all know that there are adventures to be had. We all know that there are other good people out there who are trying to do positive, valuable, productive things in the world. So focus on those good things and go for them. Don't let the negative people over-influence your thinking, because then the negative people really are sucking away the most important thing that you have, which is your chance to make your life all that it can be.